Now, specifically, in Rule 1.6 in ABER, it says that lawyers can't reveal information relating to a representation without consent. And in the Part C, it says, requires lawyers to make reasonable efforts to prevent adverent or unauthorized disclosure or unauthorized access to client information, right? So how do you and the firm actually protect the privilege in practice and not just in paper? Because you're a fractional CEO, and that's one big concern which they might have. Now I have the last difficult question, and that is, what's the uncomfortable truth about this model that vendors won't say out loud on a podcast?
The uncomfortable truth is that it can feel uncomfortable.
So could you share 3 red flags a managing partner of a law firm should look for when, let's say, waiting for someone for this specific role?
Okay, I want to make sure I understand the question. So if you're a managing partner at a law firm, which means you are the key decision maker, and what are the red flags if you're thinking of bringing on a fractional COO?
Fractional CEO. Our next guest is the founder of COO Solution, where he helps business owners scale, streamline operations, and build teams that actually stick together. He helped grow his wife's business, Bold Heart, from the inside. He has a growing podcast, a roster of experienced CEO ready to place, and many case studies with numbers worth paying attention to when he's not working. He's in the Alps or with his 3 kids. So welcome, Derek, on my podcast today.
Thank you, Wes. It's great to be here. I'm happy to be a part of the show.
So, Derek, I'm just going to start with a very important question. And that is, what actually separates a fractional CEO from a consultant, an operations manager, or an executive coach? Most people use these interchangeably.
Yeah. It's a great question. Sometimes there's confusion because from the outside, people might think that they're all one of the same, but they're actually very distinct and different roles in an organization. So I'll start with the first one, which is, I think you said consultant. And by virtue of the name, they consult, they teach, they guide. But in our experience, they may not be as integrated into the operations from a day-to-day perspective in the business. I would say the same would apply perhaps for an executive coach. An executive coach might be the coach to the founder or CEO about strategy, but they're not really embedded into the operational structure of an organization. A fractional, meaning part-time, COO, Chief Operating Officer, is like your air traffic controller in the business. They are your strategic, trusted thought partner to the business owner, but they are also the one that executes the vision into the day-to-day execution. They are an operator in the business. They are your second in command, and they have, I think, a unique specialty or unique skill to be able to weave between the strategy and the vision and then into the day-to-day tactics and execution. So that's some of the distinction. I often say that a fractional COO in our book, we are not consultants, right? We are not just from the sidelines and say, oh, Wes, you should do this and you should do that. But I'm not there to actually go and do it with you or do it for you. But we're also not babysitters in the sense that we're not overseeing the day-to-day from the perspective of, did you do this and did you do that and where are we with this? We create a structure of how a business runs so that team members are more accountable. There are systems in place for how the business runs, such as SOPs, operations manuals, project management systems, so that the whole level of the organization is operating at a higher level. Things get done more efficiently. Things get done more quickly. Things get done more effectively, which means it gets done at a higher level. So the operator is usually the glue. They're like the missing piece between the strategy and the execution, and actually wired to implement and execute to get things done.
Yeah, that actually clears this up. And because, I work with law firms, this, so we've talked about it. I just want to know, what do most law firm owners fundamentally misunderstand about the thing you talked about, this role as day-to-day?
Sure.
And as a,
Yeah. I'll say this, whether it's for lawyers or real estate professionals or wealth managers, financial advisors, for most business owners, they've become a business owner in some cases by default. And what I mean by that is when they got started, they know their craft. They know their subject matter expertise. I'm a lawyer. I'm a financial advisor. I'm a real estate agent. And perhaps at a certain point in time, there was a desire for them to grow, for them to scale, for them to expand. And naturally, as they do that, they're building a business. They're building the elements of what is required for them to reach another level of whether it's success or revenue or impact within the business. So typically that means they bring in other team members to help with the delivery, maybe with the marketing, maybe with the customer service. But at a certain point, they reach what I call the glass ceiling of complexity, where they've realized, or maybe they've not consciously realized yet, that they are more of a business owner than they are of the trade that they actually started in. Doesn't mean that they can't still practice law. Doesn't mean they still can't support their clients. But at a level of where you're looking to grow and scale, the realization, or in some cases the mindset shift, is that in those examples, those individuals are actually not the best suited people to run a business. And I'm not judging the audience and saying that you can't run a business. You could. But for those that are really focused on growth and scale, the mindset shift is they realize they need to bring somebody in who is wired, who has the strengths to run a company. And so oftentimes, going back to the distinction with the COO, I like to make the analogy that the role of the business owner, the entrepreneur, their job is to make it up. What's the big vision? What's the big idea? What's the big future? And that's kind of where that job starts and stops. The role of the COO, the second in command operator, we are the ones that make it real. We are the ones that make it happen. And then with the right people in the right seats, with the right processes, they make it recur. Oftentimes you have the business owner that's over here making it up, and you have the team members over here that are trying to make it recur, but without the structure, the systems, the process, the accountability, it creates complexity. And you cannot scale complexity. You can only scale simplicity. And so the COO provides the framework, the structure, the organization of how the business could function while we're growing and scaling, that allows the business owner to stay in that sweet box of perhaps still practicing law but leveling up what they're involved with. So maybe they're really focused on high level client relationships or strategic planning, and not so much involved in the day to day, because that's usually not their zone of genius. It's maybe not the thing that lights them up at the end of the day. They want to spend time with clients and network and build relationships, not get involved in managing team and building process. So I often say that business owners, in my experience, they don't jump out of bed and say, I want more structure, I want more systems, I want more process. They know they need it, but they don't want to be the one to set it up. That's what the COO does. The operator is the one that creates that structure for the business to grow and scale, so that the founder is not involved in all of those aspects of the day-to-day.
Exactly. And this is why I think when you transition into a business owner, like you said, it's very important that you focus on the vision of the company.
Yes.
Where it's basically like, if you try to do everything on your own, I don't think you're running a business. Probably you're just employing yourself within the business.
Yes.
And that doesn't work.
Yeah.
But a lot of people that I've actually met and I've talked to, specifically in the legal industry, they have big egos, right?
Yes.
So I specifically wanted to ask this question from you, and that is, describe the firm that should not hire you. So what does a bad client look like to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I think it requires an identity shift of the CEO to realize that they are not the one by themselves to get their business to the next level. What got you here is not necessarily the thing that's going to get you there. And that could be team, that could be structure, that could be business model. But part of it is the identity, the mindset of the CEO, to realize that they are not the one to do it by themselves. And in some cases, this is some of what we help our clients with, especially with the founder, when we kind of coach them through this identity shift. You are more of a CEO. You're more of a leader. You are focused on culture. You're focused on vision. You're focused on the big future and the relationships outside of the business that are going to help you get there. If you're spending your time working in the business, that's not going to get you to 2 or 5x your business. If you're working on the business instead of in it, that's the mindset shift that will allow them to scale. But to your question, there is ego at play, because they often, in our experience, have the perspective that, listen, nobody can do it like me. And frankly, they're right. But if you're trying to scale on the shoulders of just the business owner, where all of the client relationships are up here, all the how-to are up here, all of the operations are up here, all the questions that come up, the bottlenecks, where the team members, I'm not quite sure what to do here. Better ask Bob, better ask Jane. He's the business owner. He knows, she knows. And if you want to scale, you can't scale when everything lives in your brain around how the company should run. So it requires that identity shift and really letting go. And I know that sounds a lot easier said than done, but when you have that second in command, I often say that trusted second in command that is your strategic thought partner, you have the confidence to say, I'm making up this idea. I'm not saying we have to implement it tomorrow, but the COO is there to say, great, I've got it. And as soon as you say go, I'll go ahead and execute. Because here's the thing, entrepreneurs, business owners, they tend to start a lot of things, but they're usually not wired to finish a lot of things. So the COO is the finisher. We are the yes to the idea, which gives the business owner a lot of confidence. And when they have that confidence, it's like a snowball. It just keeps building and building, and they can see a bigger picture. They can see a bigger future, which feeds back to the confidence to create more of what that future looks like. So it's a really interesting and powerful dynamic, but they have to be willing to step out of the comfort zone of being the person that knows everything, that can do everything, and trust and delegate with the structure around it to support that growth, and then realize that the best use of their time in the business is not in the business, it's actually working on the business. That's a really, really important distinction.
Yeah, and that's so true because it's relatable to my own company. When I, started, I'm guilty as charged, but I was of the same mindset. I was building my own website. Yeah. I was basically running the operations. I was like handling the HR, the finance, everything. Because initially you don't have that kind of money as well.
You have to, yeah.
But then, I don't know, even when I, started hiring people, I would still get into the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed was the client acquisition actually dropped rather than increase. Although I was thinking that everything that I'm doing is perfect. My website looks perfect. My guides look perfect. But actually, I did not find time to address to the questions which my clients had. Yeah. And to create that, the vision you're talking about. And I kept on doing that for one whole year until I realized that what I need to do is I need to market this. Yes. That's my job. Yeah. I need to make sure that I go in front and sell my company or sell the services that I basically mentioned. A lot of people do that. But then, because I'm in software development and marketing, I do not have certain rules that lawyers get governed by, right? So there are different states with different rules. Now, specifically, in Rule 1.6 in ABA, it says that lawyers can't reveal information relating to a representation without consent. And in the Part C, it says, requires lawyers to make reasonable efforts to prevent aberrant or unauthorized disclosure or unauthorized access to client information, right? So how do you and the firm actually protect the privilege in practice and not just in paper? Because you're a fractional CEO, and that's one big concern which they might have.
Yeah. It's a great question. Whether it's in law firms or whether it's in financial advisor firms, there are certain rules and regulations. And so part of what we do as a COO, actually, I want to take that a step back first, because I think it's an important distinction, and I'll come to your question in a moment. But I think one of the things that's really important for for business owners that are in your audience, whether they're in the legal field or software or tech or really anything, is they have to understand that in order for the business to change, things need to change operationally. And sometimes what happens is, and I've seen this firsthand and I've experienced this, kind of a similar situation to what you were describing, is that business owners often, they go like this. They're like, I want growth. I want scale. I want maybe to exit, 10 years down the road. I've got legacy that I want to pass my business on to. Subconsciously, what they may not realize is that they have the foot on the gas, but at the same time, they have the foot on the brake. Subconsciously, because if they bring in the growth and the scale, where does it fall? It falls on them. It falls on their shoulders and the infrastructure behind in the backstage of their business that is not poised to support that level of growth and scale. So they need to really get the structure in place for the foundation to be able to support that growth and scale in order for them to feel confident to move forward. So I think that's an important distinction. And to answer your question in a more specific way, yes, we help our clients with what they need to do to grow and scale or 2x or increase profit, right? These are the strategies, these are the ideas, these are the future objectives that we want to accomplish. How we do that is we focus on how you're doing what you're doing, right? And the how is sometimes handled by the team members that are accessible to work within the constructs or the constraints of the rules and the regulations. We're not stepping in and, I would say, documenting legal cases or sharing, confidential information, but we're providing the infrastructure, the systematic way of doing that. And part of that is relying on the team to do what they're doing even better. I'll give you an example. So one of the things that we do with most clients in the beginning, especially with team members, because some team members are quite, to be honest, they're quite apprehensive, right? With somebody like a COO coming in that's looking, like the air traffic controller at all aspects of the business. Is my job at risk? Am I going to be judged by what I'm doing and how I'm doing things? No. There's no judgment here. We are not about stepping into a business and shaking the tree of the business to get things to fall. We're looking under the hood of the business and asking the question, what's working? What's not working? How do we do more of what's working? How do we fix, change, update, or improve what's not working? And in the beginning, We do it for you. We might build the structure of how to create an operations manual. We'll build the structure of how we create SOPs or a project management system. So the team members can see in their day-to-day, which is quite active and busy, that there's a new way, there's a different way, there's a better way. And we get them to kind of buy into that. And then over a period of time, it shifts from I'm doing it for you to we're doing it together. So they have buy-in.
Yeah.
They have a sense of accountability and ownership and responsibility. And they tend to feel like this is actually going to be better. I can feel like I can get more done. I can claim more responsibility. I feel more empowered in my role. And team members really, really crave that. And then eventually our objective is that you do it by yourself, meaning they've now fully embraced the new process of how we do things around here. They've elevated up in their role and their responsibility. And as the saying goes, which I know sounds a bit cliche, but a rising tide lifts all boats, and everybody's rowing in the same direction at a higher level. And then that way, the COO can then focus on new initiatives and new ideas and strategies coming from the founder. It's an evolution. It's a process. But I think I'm hoping I'm answering your question in a way that addresses that concern, which is legitimate. But we're not getting into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty. There are some clients that we work with in the financial space with they have a CRM, right? A customer relationship management tool. They don't have access to that. Their compliance team won't allow it. That's fine. But we're working with the team members who do have access to understand how are you doing what you're doing and kind of walk me through your process. And the last thing I'll share in this point is that usually for team members at that level, that is a question that the business owner has never asked. They've been passed down that this is how we do things around here from when I joined because, Aves, the business owner, told me this is how we do legal documentation, right? So they just kind of embrace this way of doing things, but they've never had the time or they've never had the capability or the ability on their own to ask. And so they're just doing what they're doing. And what they're doing is what they're doing, and they can keep on doing what they're doing. But when a COO starts to step in and say, so walk me through your process, show me how you do what you do, they're like, okay. And when the CEO is saying, this is going to change the entire organization for good, they get on board and I don't say they get excited. Some of them do, but some of them feel really, really empowered in this new way of moving forward.
Yeah, and I believe this is one of the biggest challenges that you might face, and that comes from employees themselves.
Yeah.
Because, I know a lot of companies in software development space who are working with enterprises. And what they say even today is they say, okay, AI is here, but 60% of enterprises still onboarding on cloud.
Yeah.
Like they're so far behind. And the main reason is because of the momentum it has and the inertia that develops because of it. That to bring even small change, it takes years to implement and then train people on that. But then one question that I have, right, with prospective law firms, because they are very finicky about their information, their cases, their clients. So when you're serving multiple firms simultaneously, how do you run conflict checks and what do you do when two prospects sit on opposite side of a live matter?
Opposite side. Repeat that question again, if you could.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is you're serving like multiple firms, right?
Sure.
So you're basically, let's say, serving a firm who's doing personal injury in New York, and then another firm who's doing personal injury within the same space. So how do you make sure that there are no conflicts within your approach? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think on a practical level, we've had that situation where they weren't in the exact same space, the exact same market, but they were in a similar field. And it was not the same COO that was working for both clients at the same time. So we're somewhat deliberate to make sure that we're not giving all of the law firm clients to one particular COO, even though they may have experience in that field. We're trying to kind of differentiate and create that line of delineation between the two. But I'll say this as well. We have a methodology of how we do what we do, right? I often say that when we step into a company, we bring the experience of myself, the experience of the dozen fractional COOs that have been doing this. And at the end of the day, it really depends on what the client is looking for. What's their objective? What are they looking to accomplish? One of the first questions we ask them is, what's your North Star? Which is, what's your why? Why do you want to grow? Why do you want to scale? And then through a very in-depth kind of assessment and review period, we identify collectively together what are the things that need to happen over the first few months for us to have really, really good progress and momentum. So you can see the traction. You can see some of the forward shift of how things are happening in the business. But we also want to respect how they do things currently in some way. We are not here to implement systems just for the sake of implementing systems. If a system doesn't, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? And if that's what's working for the company, great. There's other fish that we want to fry. So I think from the perspective of kind of honoring how they are doing what they're doing, but weaving in some of the new, whether it's AI or automation or just a different perspective, it's a culture shift in the organization. And it's not just in the process and the systems and the structure, it's with the people. They have to level up that they can be more self-accountable, that they can claim more responsibility of what they're really there to do as part of the organization and feel significant in the work that they're doing. But we try to avoid any, call it conflict of interest or any sort of overlap. It's not like we're working with one client and understanding what their, law practices are and then kind of cascading that. There are some commonalities for sure. I'll give you an example. We work with a law firm. I won't get into the details of what their business is, but there was a law firm that's based in DC. Very sizable law firm, a couple dozen different lawyers in a few different avenues. They were starting to expand to different locations. And one of the things that we identified in the very beginning is there was no sense of any sort of KPIs or metric tracking. They had some spreadsheets in some places that were updated by some people some of the time. And they were reviewed every now and then. But there was no real ownership. There was no cadence to say each and every single week, what are the top 3 to 4 metrics that we should be tracking across marketing, sales, operations, and finance, and not just tracking it to say, okay, we have the numbers in the spreadsheet, we'll go on to the next week. No. It's about ownership. So installing that culture of ownership to say, listen, if our goal is 4 new cases a month, I'm making up the example, right? And there are, whether it's account managers or there's legal professionals or there's clerks that are involved, somebody's got to own that number every single week. And they need to be prepared every Tuesday at 10 a.m. when that meeting happens. If that number is on track, you better tell us why. What's working that is getting it on track? But if it's off track, why? And what can we do? What can you do, the person that owns that number, to get it back on track, right? Well, we're not getting enough leads. The account manager is not following up in our sales process. So we're losing prospects through the pipeline, right? Or there's a real gap from the time a client says yes to the time that they get onboarded. And so by the time they get onboarded, it's 3 weeks later, and we're having to pick up the pieces again. These are the questions that in a busy organization like a law firm day to day, serving clients, doing casework, going to court, whatever that might be, they don't think about it in that way because they've got a full plate. So it allows them to think about things and look at things in a different perspective.
Exactly. And basically when these metrics come forward, they see it. Obviously, the decision making is pretty easy then because you have the data to actually rely on rather than just guessing.
Yeah.
In fact, I have, I basically was auditing a firm recently. It was another personal injury lawyers. They have a lot of issues going on. Yeah. And because the most, the biggest issue with them is they have to make sure that everything, like if the client comes in, they have to be very, very quick on onboarding, right? Because if that person is in distress, they're going to move to another lawyer, right? So they have a lot of things going on and they often overlook on the real data, right? That's coming through. So I was auditing this firm and I realized there were 2 fractional people, right? So there was a fractional CMO and there was a fractional CEO, right?
Okay.
And the CMO was basically pretty angry because he said that our marketing efforts are bringing in leads, but because the intake people are not actually qualifying them quickly enough and they just lose the leads over there, right? But the real problem was neither were wrong actually. The issue was that the data that was generated by their marketing efforts would go to their CRM, and then most of the data was like junk leads or people like just calling them to inquire and stuff. And they were not sending that data back, right? So there was no connection between the CEO and CMO, right? Yeah. So they were not working together. When that data would not reach Google back, Google was just optimizing for bot clicks and other stuff. So that firm was actually spending like $20,000 a month on Google ads. And trust me, they were losing 14,000 over bot clicks every month, right? Wow. That could have been used, right?
Yeah.
Now, what happens when a firm has hired different fractional people? How do you ensure that there is a working environment because everybody is like remotely working? What do you do to make sure the bridge is there so there's no leakages in the middle?
Yeah, great question. So I'll answer that in a couple different ways. The first way is just, again, maybe for your audience, to provide some context. One of the things that we look at in every organization, law firm, tech, almost any industry, is what we call the path to scale. And the path to scale is a linear scale, and it starts with marketing. I often say that the sole purpose of marketing is to generate qualified leads, full stop. There's a lot of things that we could do in marketing, but there's probably only a handful of things that your company should do to generate qualified leads. Doesn't mean that you need to be doing, live streams on TikTok. It should be that you're doing networking events and building up your referral sources, right? As an example. Then we move on to sales. The sole purpose of sales is to close said qualified leads. Yeah. There is a big distinction between marketing and sales. Marketing and sales they work together, but they're not the same function. One is it brings people to the door and knocks on the door. The other is they open the door and invite them in to have a conversation. That is the sales process, right? And I'm kind of simplifying because there's a lot of things that happen underneath that. And I'll get to that as part of your question in a moment. Operations is just delivering a really good service, your product, to what you've just sold, right? And I know there's a lot more that's
Yeah.
in operations. It's like the kitchen sink, it's the delivery, it's the product, it's the legal, it's the tech, it's the service, etc. And then finance is just a good output of doing very well marketing, sales, and operations, right? And then it kind of feeds back in. But I start with marketing because in our experience, marketing is the driver. Because without marketing, none of that other activity can happen.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, in your example, you may have somebody that is a CMO that owns marketing. You have somebody that's sitting like as in a CRO seat, or your sales team lead, or a closer, or your sales team, right? They need to understand, this is our experience of how we do it. The sole purpose of marketing is to generate qualified leads. Quality leads, not leads. And so if the CMO is responsible for the output, metric, and result of qualified leads, and the feedback from the sales team is, listen, 40% of them are junk, right? They're not even qualified. They're tire kickers. They're not even in our market. That is not a sales problem. That is a marketing problem.
Marketing problem. Yeah.
On a flip side, let's say the leads are coming in and on paper they're qualified. They're filling out an intake form and based on data and looking at information to say they're qualified, they're interested, they're motivated, they've pre-selected themselves, and the sales function is dropping the conversion rate from what it really could be. That is not a marketing problem. That is a sales problem. So we compartmentalize with ownership. And yes, to your example, there may be some conflict. There may be some misunderstanding. And one of the roles of the COO, not the CEO, but the COO, is to resolve departmental issues, which is marketing is not working hand in hand with sales. Sales is not working hand in hand with operations because they're territorial. My job is to close the deal. I punt it over to client onboarding. If client onboarding takes 3 weeks because their process needs to get some work, that's not my problem. So that's a little bit of the ego, but the COO is going to step in. They are their air traffic controller. They're looking across the whole spectrum of the business. Where's the bottleneck? Where are things falling through the cracks? Where are there improvements that need to be made? Where is there not enough ownership and accountability? And they are the ones to resolve those strategically and carefully, not to step in and fix it in the sense of like, well, I'll close for you or I'll go get your leads for you. No. It's holding them accountable, but ensuring that there's fluidity across the organization as opposed to kind of the finger pointing that may be happening in some examples.
Yeah, that's a great answer, actually, Derek. And that actually, you have actually distinguished the two processes, which are the most important for bringing the revenue, right? And they have to work hand to hand. So I'm going to move a little bit towards the next step, right? So say, I was actually reading this post from another lawyer on my LinkedIn, and he was complaining about how AI has not been really good for his firm because he says that we use AI carefully. We make sure that we don't take any legal advice. We make sure the citations. But then he says, once we get the email or the case files deposited online, the clients basically use ChatGPT and they write everything from the ChatGPT and then they send the slop to us. And then it's our job to fix that slop, right?
Yeah.
Now there are two problems. One, the slop it generates because people are sending it, the client's side. And then obviously, in a firm which is boutique or maybe mid-sized, a lot of, in the operations, people are like drafting initially and then it goes up and then goes up through different checks. But there might be a lot of leakages in that system where I have seen every now and then there are articles coming out with some lawyer has been fined for 50,000 or 10,000 US dollars because he did not check the citations.
Yeah.
Now in this era, right, how can operations help in reducing these AI errors and protect the firm from its reputation and also the court fees that they have to put in if something goes wrong?
So disclaimer, I am not a compliance expert and I am not an AI expert. I use AI and we use AI extensively in my company and with our clients. However, what I can share from my own experience is that a lot of people, you and I included, it's natural human behavior, are trying to find the easy way. We're trying to see what is the quickest, fastest, cheapest, most way to get something done, to get a result, to get some sort of response, if you will. And obviously with AI, it's been a huge impact to maybe not having to do the work, right? Not having to do the research, not having to really kind of get into some of the nitty gritty. And I think where most individuals, most business owners, and I'm speaking generally, right? Because I've had this conversation with entrepreneurs and friends, which is where there's my experience and my opinion is that, as you've probably seen, even in the last few months, the landscape of what's happening with AI and what's possible is shifting dramatically, drastically, often. What we were doing a month or two ago is very different from what's happening now. And what's going to be happening in the next 2 months, we probably can't really foresee what that is going to look like. I think the distinction is, this is what my reflection is the distinction is where does the line get drawn between decision making and judgment? And in a point where I feel like generally people are not ready to adopt AI for decision making and judgment, but they are willing to adopt it for research and information gathering and strategic thinking and analysis. And that's made their lives easier, personally and professionally. But that doesn't mean that they can let their guard down and be not as diligent and not as focused, and maybe even more in a more severe case, more intentional about what that information is presented, and then doing their own due diligence, doing their own fact finding, their own verification. Because listen, AI makes mistakes. You can see it every single time you put in a prompt. AI is not human. We make mistakes, right? And if you pressure test that sometimes with what they give to you and what you go back, because you know what's coming back is maybe not 100% legit, you're going to see that it's not always correct. ChatGPT is a yes engine, right? It's going to say what it thinks it wants you to hear. And other engines might be a little bit more sophisticated. Claude, as an example, you know, we can go on and on a whole other show about AI, but I think the real distinction, and we've done this with some of our clients, because they're in the bubble of AI, right? It's like a squirrel, like, oh, there's Manus. Oh my gosh, I have to learn OpenClaw. How do I put this with my my company? I'm like, whoa. First, develop the use case. Don't just use AI for the sake of using AI because you're in a mastermind and somebody says, I built this new agent that's automating 10% of my daily activity. That doesn't mean that you should, right? But at the same time, if your team members can be exposed to it, we have a client where we help them with their organization. Each team member is allowed to spend up to 5 hours a week playing with AI, just getting comfortable with the platform. Nothing professional, not in real case form, but in like test case form, if you will, just to kind of understand from a workflow perspective, from a strategic thinking perspective, from an analysis, research perspective. But at the end of the day, draw the line. You're not using AI to make the decision for you. You're not using AI to be the judgment factor. You are still the ultimate judgment factor for now. That may change over the time, but for now, that's a little bit of what I see has been going on in that regard.
Yeah, and it's very important that I always tell people is that if you see a tool anywhere, right? So identify if it solves a problem that you have. You don't buy the tool and find a problem then.
Right.
So you have to
Great
first
point.
see if you're actually, and a lot of people are basically hype buying it because somebody told them it's a great product. But I don't have that problem. Why should I buy it? And a lot of people do this. And I think that also comes down to your job as a function where you can actually tell them with data that, okay, this is the problem and this tool can really help you in this, rather than binge buying stuff that other people are actually doing.
Yeah.
So it could be different for everybody, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Part of what we help, not just with AI, but in general, we have this, it's a very simple framework, but it often helps team members realize, how do I fix or solve what's going on that's not working? So in the case of AI, I always say, like you said, I love the expression, don't buy the tool, it will create the problem. But what is the problem that we're trying to fix? And is AI a step in this, in the fixing of that problem? Maybe not. But that doesn't mean we're just bringing it in to put it in automatically. But part of what we empower team members to think about, because sometimes team members they're very focused on solving problems, right? We want problem solvers, right? I'm following this workflow and I got stuck and I have a problem. And so I've got to ask Aves because he's the one that knows. And then guess what? The next week, similar type of problem happened and I get stuck. And so what happens? I go to Aves again. And so that's just the pattern. That's just the behavior. That's what we call fixing problems. We don't fix problems, we solve issues. So we ask, what is the underlying issue that is causing the problem? Because we can fix problems all day long. Humans are natural problem fixers, right? Give me a problem, I'll fix it. But often our mindset is, I fix one problem, I'm on to the next one. And we often don't take the time and the awareness to ask, what is the issue that is causing these problems? And let's solve for the issue that's underneath so that these problems don't have to be fixed anymore. And when you get team members, I know it sounds very simple, but sometimes they're like, that makes a lot of sense, right? And usually it's the simple things that actually move the needle the most. And so it's that approach, or just the why question. This was a problem. Why? Well, because Susan didn't know what to do in the procedure. Why? Well, because the procedure wasn't updated. Why? Because when Bob left, he took the procedure file on his personal Gmail and we don't have access to edit it. That's the issue, right? So it gets to the root cause of what's really causing the bottleneck, the delay, the challenge. These are the little things that often get in the way of the big things for companies that are growing and scaling.
Yeah, and that's exactly why you should actually first look at the problems that causing you to stall your operations, and then think about the solutions afterwards.
Yeah.
But Derek, there's something, I get this question asked a lot, right? And that is basically when we're doing the marketing stuff, or we're building a software. Law firms ask us, when are we going to see something, it being successful, or what is the time frame for the results to come up, right? And that's exactly what I'm going to ask you. So if a law firm comes to you and like they say, okay, in next 12 months, what is one metric they're going to see, they're going to build for us, so you're going to do something that's going to change, right? So what is that time frame, first of all? Is it different for different firms? And what are the key metrics that you basically show them that the operations are now successful within your firms, and they can, they cannot break and it will stick?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard. I'm going to be honest. It's hard to answer that because I could go a couple different ways.
Yeah.
I think there's a practical reflection and I would say a direct reflection and an indirect reflection. The direct reflection is something that can be tangible. We can touch it. We can see it. We can feel it. So that might be if you're tracking metrics. In the beginning, I'm probably making it up and using the right term, not the right terminology, but let's say, from like the example of like sale to onboarding to, the next step in the legal process, whatever that might be. Let's say right now it's 15 to 20 days, and we want to get that down to 5 to 10 days. Well, that's something that could be measured, that can be tracked, that can be monitored week over week. The CEO can see that, the team can contribute to that. And so if we see week over week, we're not just looking at 1 week and then moving on to the next week. We're looking at the trends. We're looking at the patterns. We're looking at the historicals. We're looking at the targets of where we want to be. So in the first 3 months, we can't go from say like 20 days to 5 days, but maybe in the first 3 months we go from 20 days to 17 days, right? So incremental. This is progress, not perfection. So there's kind of direct reflection in that way. And part of that also is, I would say, maybe feedback from the team. This is running more smoothly. Like we've heard that from the clients that we've worked with. Like this is much different than what it used to be. It just seems like it clicks. There's a little bit more of the flow. And that's a great environment, like energy in the environment of that happening. People just start to feel more in motion and things kind of, happen. Indirectly, I think it really comes down to the feeling, not the thought, but the feeling of the founder of how they perceive what's happening in the day to day. Are they still involved as much or not? And this is a metric that we track kind of independently from the rest of the organization, because typically in the beginning, in our cases, at some level or another, the founder CEO is the bottleneck, right? They're involved too much in this area, too much in that area, too much up in here. So one of the things that we have them do in the very beginning is a time audit. Like literally your activity inventory. What do you spend your time on each and every day? Not in a detailed manner, but generally speaking, over a period of a couple of weeks. Of course, it can fluctuate. It can be different. And then let's see how that shifts in the first 30 days. We'll do another exercise. And part of that might be, I'm not in as many client meetings. I'm not having to manage the team as much. I don't have as many one-on-ones on my appointment calendar anymore. I don't have as many emails. I'm spending more time out of the office, going to business lunches or networking events. Like that's something that you can still kind of quantify, but the business owner energetically feels different because they can see things are happening, but the feeling to them is that they've got more time back. They've got more confidence. They've got more clarity. And it's like a wave. As long as you keep riding that wave, and there'll be setbacks, right? It's never, operational utopia. There's going to be people left. We uncovered this big problem, right? It's never linear. It's going to be pivots. But as long as the business owner is feeling confident on that journey through some of the high highs and the low lows, and when we get to that point, may not be within the first year, but within the first 90 days, one of the things we do is we look back and say, look where we started. And from a place of appreciation and gratitude, say like, we got that much accomplished in the first 30, 60, 90 days. And look at where we are in terms of operational workflows. Look at where you are in terms of your time coming back to you. Imagine then gives us confidence of what it could be like for the next 90 days and the next 90 days. It's incremental progress, not like leaps and bounds perfection to try to get it to a utopia. There's always a new level, new devil. So it's really just kind of honoring where we came from, where are we going from a North Star perspective, but also let's track each and every month or quarter, which is what we do every quarter with monthly check-ins throughout to make sure that we're feeling really, really good about that progress.
Right. And that's actually something, obviously, there are a lot of things that you see as, you go and you see things develop in a positive way. But then, fractional CEOs might not be for every firm, right? So how do you know when a firm has basically outgrown a fractional role in operations and genuinely needs a full-time CEO?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. One we get quite often. I'll just very practically, this is my experience. I use company size in terms of team, in terms of revenue, and volume of complexity of where they are going. Not volume of complexity now. That's what we bring us in to do. It's the volume of complexity of where it's going to be. Typically, in our experience, a company that is under around 20 million in turnover with a team of about 25 to 30 or less, the fractional model applies. Anything above that part, it's somewhat of a challenge. It could still work, but at that level, if you're doing 20 to 25 million, you're growing 20% year over year, you're adding team members, you've got new markets that you're going towards, you're diversifying, you may need the permanent fixture of a full-time COO. But we've had clients that we've been working with that went from high multiple seven figures now at low multiple 8 figures, and they're going to 15 million. And the model of fractional still applies for 2 reasons. One, they come batteries included. This is not their first rodeo, right? They know what to do and how to do it. Their zone of genius is running other people's companies. So you're getting a level of expertise that's going to feel like, wow, here we go. Where if you bring in somebody that's, full time, but have they been doing this for 15 years? Have they the track record of scaling multiple 7-figure and 8-figure companies over and over? Do they bring the tool kit of how to do accountability, systems, and structure? They may, but in our experience, when you have a lane of somebody who is a well-suited, trusted, experienced COO, you can really, really move the needle with a fraction of the model. But yes, at a certain point, the fractional model may dissolve. We've built the foundation, we built the fundamentals. If you're 10xing and you're going to from 20 million to 50 million, you may need more than 2 to 3 days a week, as an example. Yeah,
exactly. And this also brings to something I really wanted to ask you, because while I was researching about your model, I found a lot of concerns, and I want you to be honest in this,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
So and you might have, as a person who has worked in this industry for very, very long, right? So there are always good people in the industry. There are always, some people who are not that great, right? So could you share 3 red flags a managing partner of a law firm should look for when, let's say, waiting for someone for this specific role?
Okay, I want to make sure I understand the question. So if you're a managing partner at a law firm, which means you are the key decision maker, and what are the red flags if you're thinking of bringing on a fractional COO?
Fractional CEO,
Okay.
Exactly.
Red flag number 1 is defaulting to the fact that you think local is better than virtual. There are a lot of law firms that I understand have an in-person presence, and the belief is it's going to work better if they're in my office. And I completely understand that. I get that, I call it an objection. I get that, statement all the time. In our experience, for 2 primary reasons, I will counter that if that's the case. Number 1, when you buy, I would say buy local, but when you work with local, you may settle. You may not get the best skilled operator for your company that could be in the next state, or it could be in the next country, or it could be in the same time zone, but they don't have to be down the street. And there's this comfort level. There's this ease of when somebody's in the office, Derek can just go talk to Yves and have a coffee, and that is good. But at the same token, having a virtual component, it forces the accountability. It forces the operational excellence to be in place without the side benefit of just being able to have conversations here and there. So it creates a different mechanic. So I think the one red flag is thinking I need to bring in somebody that's local. The other red flag is assessments. We use a lot of assessments with our COOs and clients to understand how they're wired to take action. What are their strengths? What are their natural zones of operating? And those are very different. So if CEO brings in somebody, again, who's very idea-focused, creator, future vision, etc., brings in somebody else who gets excited about new ideas and creating and starting and thinking big picture, that's not an operator. That's another entrepreneur. You don't need another vision person in the business. That's the business owner. You need somebody who's like, great, I will be the string to your kite. I will be the one to finish what you have started. I will be the number 2, because I don't crave the spotlight. I crave getting things done. I crave structure. So that's another red flag, is whether it's an assessment or asking questions, what excites you, right? And if they say new ideas and starting things and, well, tell me about process and structure. And if they're like, nah, maybe not so much, that's not a number 2. And then the third red flag, I would just say, I don't want to say personality fit, but I would say, I say resonance. Is this somebody that you really feel that you would enjoy working with? Because at the end of the day, the dynamic is most successful when the CEO and the COO are perfectly aligned on the same page, as almost as close to all the time as possible. There will be healthy conflict. That's what is a healthy CEO and COO relationship. And when the pushback comes from the COO, it says, the team is already strapped and you have this new initiative and they're burning 60, 80-hour weeks. That may be a when, not if scenario, and being able to have the confidence as a COO to, I don't say push back, but to be able to be the one that might say, maybe not right now, because we've got these other 10 things that we're really on, focused on at the moment. You don't want a yes person in the COC. You want somebody that's going to, we can make it happen. But if we've also got 19 other initiatives that are happening at the same time, and we have a budget cap and we can't bring on other people, that's going to burn your team, and that's not going to get any of those other things done. So just to recap, I think it's local versus virtual, and not falling trapped to that. Number 2 is assessments and really understanding how they're wired, their strengths, and the partnership between the energy and resonance of being able to, I want to work with this person day in and day out for the foreseeable future. So.
Great answer, Derek. That's amazing, how you explain this. Now I have the last difficult question, and that is, what's the uncomfortable truth about this model that vendors won't say out loud on a podcast?
The uncomfortable truth is that it can feel uncomfortable. When you bring in a COO, it can feel like it's really going to shake things up. And in some cases, it does. The uncomfortable truth is that we have worked with some clients, some companies where team members have exited. Not by intent, not by design, but the team that got you here is maybe not the team that's going to get you there. And some team members don't subscribe to a new way of doing things. They don't subscribe to a culture of accountability. People, you know, the expression, who moved my cheese, right? And sometimes cheese gets moved in the way of a rising tide lifts all boats. And so the uncomfortable truth is that it can create some, I don't say exit, but it can create some, you know, a little bit of not, I'm trying to think of the right word. Shift is really, I think, what it comes down to. And that shift may mean that some team members exit because they're not the right person for the right role of where you are going to go. They might have been the right person for the right role to where you are, but maybe not the right person in the right role for where you're going to go. So that is the uncomfortable truth that sometimes does get materialized in the work that we do.
That's great, Derek. I love that answer. And honestly, my audience would have loved this conversation. And honestly, I don't have much time left, but sitting with you, it feels like, you know, the time has flown.
Yeah, it's gone quickly.
Yeah. And honestly, I could keep talking to you for a very, very long time because there's so many things that we have left today. And I would love to invite you again sometime
Would love to
share. And I, specifically for, you know, different size of law firms that I want to talk about.
Sure.
So in maybe future episodes, we can sit down.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining in, Derek. Is there anything that I left and you wanted to share with my audience? Please go ahead.
The only thing I'll share, if it's okay, is that I know that sometimes people might be listening and say, well, I wonder if maybe now is the right time to think about bringing on a fractional COO. So if I can offer a resource, it's just on the website, thecoosolution.com. There's a quiz that's there that helps business owners understand, you know, not just is this the time for a fractional COO, but, you know, based on where you are and based on where you're going, what does it look like? And how could a COO help you get there in a way so it doesn't feel like it's all on them? So just a resource on the website if that's something that I can provide. So
That's great. In fact, from this, I have another question. Basically, sorry, last question.
Okay.
If people are listening to you and they wanted to contact you, do you offer like a free consultation or an audit of their firm? So, yeah. So, could you share that about how can they contact you? And because I think that would be great.
Yeah, I always say the quiz is the best place to start because that's really going to be an eye opener for those that are just kind of understand a bit more. It's very insightful. It's very rich. It's a lot of helpful information. So I always say start there because that could be an eye opener. After that, if the audience is thinking the next step is to have a conversation, they can, through the website, they can contact me. I have a conversation with each business owner to talk about, you know, what does the results of that reflection in the quiz really mean, and talk through a bit more in detail in the situation. So I'm welcome to have those conversations for those that might be interested as well.
Yeah. So that's great. And I think everybody who's listening, please talk to experts like Derek before you make a decision rather than ChatGPT. Also, he gives you free advice, and ChatGPT does give you free advice, but his advice is way more impactful than ChatGPT.
Thank you, Aves. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Derek, again for coming in. I hope to see you again sometime. Have a nice day.